take your seats as we light the flame. Take your seats and prepare for the service. And Patton's going to light the flame for us. Thank you, Patton. Our opening congregational song will be Singing for Our Lives in the Pink Book on page 101. I invite you to stand, are willing and able. Number 101 in the Pink Book, Singing for Our Lives by Holly.
So we're going to do 8.
1 through 8.
We are a gentle and free people, and we are singing for our lives. We are gentle and free people, and we are singing for our lives. We are just a singing people, and we are singing for our lives. We are just a singing people, and we are singing for our lives. We are straight and came together, singing for our lives. We are straight and came together, and we are singing for our lives. We choose to work and live together, and we are singing for our lives. We choose to work and live together, and we are singing for our lives. We love the Spirit in each other, and we are singing for our lives. We love the Spirit in each other, and we are singing for our lives. We are gentle, loving people, and we are singing for our lives. We are gentle, loving people, and we are singing for our lives. We are a cult of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are a cult of many colors, and we are singing for our lives. We are old and young together, and we are singing for our lives. We are old and young together, and we are singing for our lives.
Thank you all very much. That was lovely. You know, that's a long time anthem by Holly Near, and first known in the women's movement, and now universally known. And all the music today, by the way, will be by women. And I'd like to introduce our pianist for today. It's Charlie Vogt. So Welcome to the first existentialist congregation of Atlanta. We are a spiritual community based upon existentialist philosophy and feminist principles. We make our spiritual homes in this building, the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built by the African American East Atlanta Baptist Church more than 100 years ago. We acknowledge that racial hostility drove those African Americans from this area, and we honor them in the powerful history of this place. And I hope you saw the plaque on the outside of the door as you came in. It is our designation by the city of Atlanta that we are a protected space now. And we also acknowledge that in the 1800s, the Muscogee Creek people were driven from this area, from this land, and we support justice for all indigenous and all people.
Can we applaud the fact that we are now protected space?
That we're now a protected space? Certainly, yes. So this is international. We're celebrating International Women's Day today, and it was the first National Women's Day in the U.S. and founded by a socialist labor organizer named Teresa Montiel. I won't call her name out. And then 2 years later, International Women's Day was celebrated globally, celebrating the achievements of women, but most especially calling attention to the conditions under which women worked and calling for an end to inequality, gender inequality. Nowadays, International Women's Day is celebrated on March the 8th, and it is a global day celebrating women's cultural, social, political, and economic achievements. It is also a day calling for the acceleration of women's equality and ending all gender inequality. And a quote for now is very appropriate. I am not free while any woman is unfree, even if her shackles are very different from mine. Audre Lorde. So if anyone has any community announcements, I will read them later in the service. If you'd like to write them down and bring them forward, I'll collect them this moment, if anyone has any. If not, very well. So do we have any newcomers who would like to be recognized? Yes?
Hi, I'm Jessica Goodnight. I'm from here.
Yeah, can you tell us how you heard about us? And
I came to a Kirtan service here a long time ago that a friend did, and thought I would join post-COVID, community stuff.
well, we're so glad to have you today, Jessica.
Welcome.
Is there anyone else? Yes, Susan.
I'm Susan. I'm visiting Atlanta this weekend. Linda Bell and I have been friends since graduate school 20 years ago at Emory. And my two children call her almost Auntie Linda. We've been
So, do we have any birthdays or anniversaries to be recognized today? So let's sing happy birthday to Laura, and then Cindy Lou, and then Katrice. So happy birthday to Laura.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Lord. Happy birthday to you.
And now it's Cindy Lou. have another congregational song. It is from the notebook this time, so it's alphabetical. How could anyone? Look under the H's. How could anyone?
This song is really a punchy. And so the first time that we sing it through, I want you to sing it.
If we don't have programming at this moment, but it's in the basement for young people. However, if you are thinking that you would like to have programming for young people, please call the office administrator at First G the week ahead of a service, and we'll arrange for someone to be here with children's programming. Otherwise, everyone is welcome to stay, no matter what their age. I always liked it myself when I was a child, to stay upstairs and hear what the grown-ups were hearing. I wanted to know what the real stuff was. Not that children's stuff is not real too, but you know. Women belong in all places where decisions are being made. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She also said, I don't know the exact quote, but someone asked her, well, how many women should be on the Supreme Court? And she said, why 9, of course. No one's ever questioned there being 9 men justices. Oh, by the way, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Charlene Ball. And as you can see, I'm the service leader or facilitator for today, so good to see you all. So now we have a moment in which our fellowship minister, Marcia Mitchener, usually says a few words to us. And is Marcia here at this time? So, if Marcia is not here, we will go directly to sharing of community announcements. And I have a community announcement here. The current art exhibition features the work of Tom Murphy, and the proceeds of all pieces for sale will go directly to the art deal. So I invite you to enjoy the art that's on the wall. And buy any if you are so moved. So at this time, we take a few moments for congregational silence in which we think, pray, meditate, cogitate, or just sit quietly with one another. There are candles on either side of the sanctuary that you can light in honor of those who passed. I will call time when about 5 minutes is up. Our next congregational song will be another song written by a woman, A Weed is a Relative Thing, by Malvina Williams. I invite you to stand as you're willing and able. It's on page 75 in the pink book. 75 in the pink book. A weed is a relative thing.
I love this song because when I was in my 20s, we unofficially named it the Dandelion Defense League. And some of the things that are ordinarily not thought very important are really important and have all kinds of uses in treating people. So that's why this song has such
Sit back and I'll sing a song. It's all about something that nobody needs, but the song will unifies it. It's not about moonlight, it's not about tune, it's not about prayer. No, this song weed is a relative thing. A weed is a flower someone said to me. Well, you must have looked like a flower. A flower is a plant someone brings by the hour, and some use further from seed. But let's talk some more about weed. A weed is a relative thing. There are some that I've seen that are flowers to me. Just in life I think I just fine. And I know people use them to make a nice wine. But no, free. They long not the same as their feet. I'm glad that I sang you this song. It was all about something that nobody needs. 'Cause the song it was quite true. It's not about moonlight, not about you. It was not about great movies. This song was all about me.
Let us help ourselves by taking up the offering. And I think the offertory, the music of the offering will be played by Charlie, and it's called The Scarf Dance by Cecile Charnade.
I want you to imagine someone dancing with a scarf and sort of a seduction.
to the music in the back. So now it's my pleasure to introduce the panel for International Women's Day. I'm going to, in a minute, make my way down to the chairs and join the speakers for today, but I'm going to introduce them now. They are going to be in the reverse alphabetical order. Libby Ware, Libby Ware, Stell, Simonton, applaud them, Linda Bell, and Katrice Baker. Can you hear me?
You have to push and hold the button to turn it on. Wait until you see the light come on.
Hello?
You have to hold the button until the light comes on.
Well, the light is on. Hello? Yeah. Good, thank you. So today, we have invited 4 members of the congregation to speak about their experiences in the women's movement and as feminists. And their work is related to that, or their lives. So we're going to start, and things that brought them to feminism also. So we're going to start with Libby Ware. All of these are long-time members. Excuse me. All of these are long-time members of our congregation. So, starting with Libby Ware.
So I grew up in a neighborhood, a suburb, and my mother was like the only person in our neighborhood who worked. All the others were stay-at-home moms. And I was raised, with the dictate, really, that I would go to college, I would have a career, and my mother would say, if you get married, that's fine, but you have to be able to provide for yourself. So that's kind of how I grew up. And so when the women's movement first started, the only thing I saw about it was just the mainstream press. And of course, you know, they painted women as, you know, these crazy women. So in 1970, when I was 15, I got this magazine, Ladies' Home Journal. My mother subscribed, I always read it, I always loved the part about can this marriage be saved? And so in 1970, 200 women converged upon the offices of the Ladies' Home Journal. And they had a list of demands, most of which were not met. But one of the things is they wanted to write some articles and have it included. So what happened is that they gave them about 8 pages, and the pages are a different color, making it harder to read than black on white. I sat in my bedroom as a 15-year-old, read this, and I was a convert. I was a feminist from then on. So a few years ago, you know, at first I just knew that there was this, you know, feminist section, and then I learned more of the history of it. And so I figured out, you know, which month it was, and I ordered it off of eBay, and so that I would have it. So yesterday, I thought, well, I need to read this over and see what it was. It is like so mainstream now. And I guess it was radical back then. And a lot of it was about housewives, as we called them then, and how unfulfilling that was, and that they had a list of demands. You know, they wanted a, you know, 6 days a week, and they wanted health insurance and a pension and, you know, Social Security. They want all this stuff. Of course, still to this day, you know, housewives, stay-at-home moms are not getting anything like that. But it was just interesting to read it from a 2025 perspective. But it worked. Now, I haven't done a whole lot in the women's movement other than just always speak out for feminism. I marched for the ERA back when that was a possibility. I did a little bit of lobbying for choice. I went on some Take Back the Night rallies, but I was never super involved. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting to tell kind of how I came to feminism. Well, for me, this is a challenging assignment to talk about. I'll try and keep it short. So I grew up in rural Alabama. I was born in 1956 and lived on a farm outside of town called Marion Junction, which was outside of Selma, Alabama. And in the 1960s, when I was growing up, this area felt like it was still in the 1930s. This was the old South. And the racial caste system was firmly in place. But all of that came to a head and changed with the civil rights movement. My father was very active against the civil rights movement, so some of my first political thinking as a teenager was kind of in reaction to that, in reaction to his, what would today be called racism. So as a teenager, I was very interested, even though it was rural Alabama, I was very aware of things in the larger world, and the women's liberation movement, as it was called then, was on my radar. I did a lot of reading as a teenager. One of the people I read a lot of was Margaret Mead, who was an anthropologist who popularized ideas about anthropology. And in thinking back, that was one of the things I think that gave the women's movement some impetus, because it introduced people to the ideas of a lot of different cultures and the idea that sex roles were different from culture to culture to some extent. So it wasn't all biologically ordained. So anyway, that I think was a precursor of the feminist movement. But in around 1970, when I was, I think, 15, I went to this thing called Youth Legislature. This was when high school students from around the state came to the state capitol and spent several days pretending to be lawmakers and learning how the legislature worked by doing it. Introducing bills, debating them, and then passing them or not. So I thought, well, I'll introduce the Equal Rights Amendment. So I stood up it was intimidating, but I stood up in the Senate chamber and introduced this resolution. It didn't take 5 minutes before it was voted down. Oh. It was just immediate, and I was disillusioned that people my age were not going to be on the same path, or didn't have the idea that that was important. So I grew up on a farm, and so even though my father was kind of a man of the old South, he didn't have fixed ideas about women necessarily. So I grew up learning. I learned to drive a tractor. I did some farm work. That was all fine. But I still felt like there was a big gap between what I could do and what my brother could do, for example. So when I went off to college and began to get to know more young men my age, I was like, wow, you could do all that? Somebody I met had been an ambulance driver, or I don't know, he'd ridden with an ambulance as a teenager, and I was thinking, they would never let me do that. So I was just aware of those differences, and this was a period when there was a lot of change going on. The sexual revolution was sort of, happening. Anyway, so, however, I left college because my father was very sick. I went home for a year. I took care of the farm after he died. That was challenging, and that was stepping into a whole different role. But my mother didn't want me to get stuck down on the farm. She sold all the livestock. I went back to college. I went to the University of Alabama this time. And the very first thing that happened when I arrived on campus was that a Playboy photographer also arrived, because he was recruiting college students for a special feature in Playboy called Girls of the Southeastern Conference. And I was incensed, and so a couple of people and I, we
we felt this was objectifying women. It was seeing women as, young women, taking advantage of them, we sort of thought. So we went and we protested at his hotel room in Tuscaloosa. Big signs, we marched back and forth, and we got attention. We may have drawn more publicity to him and helped him, but we also got publicity, and we were able to explain our position and get some press. And out of this, an organization was born called the Feminist Alliance at the University of Alabama that was active from, 1980 to 1985, something like that. And the issues we took on, we had consciousness-raising groups, we lobbied the legislature, we distributed a form of contraception that wasn't available in this country, but that it was available in Europe. It was called a cervical cap. It's still not widely used, I don't think, but we actually distributed this ourselves. We were mostly a white group. We were mostly but not all straight women, so our concerns reflected that. But anyway, so I left the University of Alabama. I came to Atlanta because it was time to leave college, and didn't have a job, kind of struggled for a while, finally found a job on a newspaper, a community newspaper. That way, we got married. So then the issues were, how do we negotiate? Who's going to do what in the household? And that took some negotiation and struggle and fighting. Then our first child was born. We decided that if she was a girl, she'd have my last name. If he was a boy, we'd have Wade's last name. That was our way of getting around the whole name thing. And at that time, I was a member of both the National Organization for Women, the Atlanta chapter, and the Leche League, which is a support group for breastfeeding mothers. And now, there was nobody in Now who had a baby, and there was nobody in the Leche League who seemed to be active as a feminist in an organization. So looking back, there was sort of a mutual incompatibility between these groups, and yet I was trying to bridge that. And I feel like even today, that tension is not resolved, because now is about fighting for job, equity in the workplace. Whereas allegedly it was about how can I be giving on a 24/7 basis to my baby, basically. So I think I probably reached 5 minutes. So anyway, I'll stop there. But the takeaway I think is that the issues. There's some issues that still carry on today from that period. One is reproductive rights, the right to determine whether you're going to be pregnant or not. But other issues are totally different, and I'm concerned about some of them, and I feel like, we have to be creative in our thinking and very aware of how the world has drastically changed and what the new issues are.
And I really want to thank, is this okay?
Yes.
Everybody? I really want to thank Charlene for inviting me to be on this panel. Years ago, I started urging people to tell their stories, preferably to write them, and preferably to get a wide audience for them, because I think that maybe our country is always engaged in deception about our history and that sort of thing. But today it's so important. We have a president who likes to lie every time he opens his mouth, a party that wants to revise history and wants to deny anything that the country may have done that was unseemly or evil or problematic in any way. And so it's very nice to be able to tell my story. I grew up in the Jim Crow South, and it was a difficult time in a lot of ways, but I was protected by the family in so many ways, but the Jim Crow laws were reinforced by religion. So it was a pretty lethal combination for people growing up. I mean, I was raised to be a very good little girl, and when I took a philosophy course after pretty much finishing my math major at Emory, and the professor stood in front of the class and said, "You will learn to argue or you won't pass this course." I went, wow. Somehow I had associated raising questions challenging the status quo, or particularly arguing with blasphemy. I mean, it really was a lethal combination for me. And a lot of people have helped me along the way, not just that professor, but that professor was extremely instrumental in my development. And I fell in love with philosophy. I loved math, and I loved creating proofs. But in philosophy, I could argue about things that were really, really, really important to me. And so that was very significant. I think I'll probably try to skip some of what I was going to say, but I started teaching part-time at Georgia State while I came back from, let me say this first though. I came back from Northwestern. I had gone there like a lot of blacks go north, I think. I was seeking the promised land. I thought it was going to be so different from the South, and it wasn't. I got all this crap about what are you going to drop out of philosophy and learn to pour tea and further your husband's career. I got that from my fellow graduate students at Northwestern. A professor there announced in front of a lot of us that fellowships were wasted on women who would, after all, only drop out of school, have babies, and the education would be totally wasted. And I didn't know how to protect myself at that point. I had not learned yet to really argue, except, on other issues, not on anything mattering to me. But I also found a lot of racism at Northwestern, and ended up tucking my tail between my legs and coming back to Emory to get a PhD. And it was an odd place. It was a very strange place. But I got the PhD with a lot of help from somebody they didn't have the good sense to keep on the faculty. And I started teaching part-time at Georgia State at that point in order to eat. Anyway, a long story. The women's movement was just beginning. And that really helped me because of being, I think there were a lot of lazy people at Northwestern, at Georgia State, to be truthful. I think they didn't want to have court cases. And so he went around the chairs department one time and said, "We don't have enough women in arts and sciences." There were hardly any. None in philosophy. And he got to my chair, said, "Well, you have one." And they just let me go. And the dean said, "That wasn't very wise, Ralph." And so Ralph saw a chance to get another position in philosophy. He was excited about that, and he didn't think he'd have to keep me. So he asked me if I'd like to come back. I had brought all my books home and all. So I went back, and there were people in the department who really didn't like my being there, but telling students that they shouldn't take courses with me because I didn't really teach philosophy. I was interested in European philosophy and existentialism in particular, and that was really hard because I had to. I mean, you can't really run around yelling at people who do that to you without terrible results, and so I had to be quiet. But I did learn to fight at Georgia State. I fought about statutes that were horrible, that we were supposed to just rubber stamp. This is when Georgia State was becoming a university. And one of the things in the statutes was you could fire a tenured faculty member for immoral or obscene behavior. And I just hit the ceiling on that because I knew that my presence there was immoral and obscene to the guys. And so I fought that without tenure. And so I kind of got known as a loudmouth, I think. And I think that helped me get tenure and promotion when I came up for tenure. I had one vote in the department for me, and he had just gotten tenure himself. And that was no doubt very, very hard to do, but he supported me. And I won my case. The dean had just appointed a committee to advise him, and so I had a committee I could appeal to. And that was very important. I think I'm running out of time, but let me just say, since I wanted to talk about learning to fight and urge everybody to try to learn, my proudest moment at Georgia State was a university faculty meeting when Vice President Patrick, whom I never saw do anything else, told us that we had serviced so many heads that semester and that the new president at Kennesaw was going to be our next graduation speaker. And he hastened to assure us that he understood she was attractive, intelligent, and articulate. And I let out a groan. People around me seemed to be a little uncomfortable with that. But I had to wait for new business. And so new business came around. I raised my hand and I asked that this be recorded so no one would forget to do this in the future. But should we ever have a male speaker who was attractive, intelligent, and articulate, then he would be sure to let us know. And I got a standing ovation. And I didn't expect that because there were so many people uncomfortable with my having a mouth. A lot of young women, I think probably most in nursing, came up to me afterwards and, really thanked me for what I had done. I suspect they were embarrassed to find themselves in this kind of gathering. But anyway, that was my proudest moment, and I thought I'd share that. Because I think to watch. I think the bullies often leave huge chances for us to step in and try to embarrass them back. And we just have to be ready, and we have to develop a lot of courage in order to do that. So thanks.
First of all, I want to thank the three of you for speaking out. Sorry for my hoarseness. But I'm Katrice, and I began my journey after my partner Sam passed away back in 1993. It was somewhat of a tumultuous journey, especially the first few years. I experimented with several items of women's clothing, dressing up and going to the store. It was simultaneously a frightening and exhilarating experience. The first time I attended a social gathering in women's clothing was in the spring of 1994. By the way, I've been a long-time member back in the 80s with Metropolitan Community Church. And when I went to the spring conference in Johnson City, Tennessee, MCC was then a church that reached out to gay and lesbian patrons. My pastor, Pastor Paul Turner, who was fully supportive of my transition, told me that I had embarrassed some of the leaders of the conference and perhaps some people attending the conference because I decided to dress as Katrice. Here above the pastors and other churches that stated it was my right and I had done nothing wrong. In August of 1994, I unintentionally created an uproar when I used the women's restroom at the MCC I attended, which was All Saints MCC. Pastor Paul nonetheless stood by my side in support. I guess you'd say I was a trailblazer at that time. I was met with verbal hostility by others, especially by my roommate I was sharing a house with in southeast Atlanta. I remember hearing the word sick from a neighbor who happened to have a gay partner as I was sunbathing in the front yard with a bathing suit. This is back in 1995. It was very hurtful. In 1996, I went into the closet so that I could work and hold a job. I had been on disability temporarily, but I decided to start working for a security firm, a temporary job during the Atlanta Olympics, which was a big thing back then. We had the Olympics back in 1996. I had work tip jobs with Ron Stott in the latter half of 1994 for spending money, but decided not to work in 1995 so that I wouldn't lose my SSI. So I spent that year out of work. That was when I worked in the garden of the house that my brother owned, growing beautiful flowers and vegetables. I decided not to go full-time until after the trauma from my neighbors and from my roommate from 1996 until around 2000. I went to a support group, Atlantic Gender Explorations. It was one of my first transgender support groups, or AGE, which is what it's called. It's first hosted by Dallas Denny. He lives up in upstate New York. We still make contact with each other. Then later, Aaron Swenson, which I would often have to go change clothes at the facility to not create any embarrassment or any conflict with my roommate. I didn't fully come out of work until fairly recently. In the late 90s, I was asked by my supervisor not to wear makeup on the job. After leaving Kroger in 2001, I decided to cool down my expression so that I could work temp jobs in 2002. From 2003 until 2008, Whole Foods tolerated how I dressed, even though there were snickers from other team members, including the store manager. They eventually came to accept. I started attending First Day in 1999 by encouragement from a UU friend. His name was Matt, who also attended. Then I would present myself as Katrice in 2001. And also dress as not, and more times than not, I would dress as non-binary. For the early start, I didn't know how congregants would feel, how they felt rather, and I didn't ask. However, I remember Cindy Lou giving me a hug during one of the Celebration of Life meetings, and Kitty Wimbish asking my name, which I replied, Katrice. So that was the first time I mentioned Katrice to the congregation. While I was still referred to as Braden as my legal name at that time, in subsequent years, as the time went by, people in the congregation slowly accepted Katrice. I dressed casually most of the time, but I stopped being afraid how I dress, no matter how I dress. Fast forward to today, and I want to end this. I'm so thoroughly grateful for the love and acceptance I get from my fellow First State congregation members. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me all right, people? Thank you so much, all of you here, for giving us your stories. I like to see how they went from a teenage person, as Libby was when she first encountered feminism, to someone in college, mainly, was Stell's story and her work on activism in college, to Linda's work in the workplace and how she struggled, to Katrice's work and she is an activist as well as having a personal story because she has been in many activist marches and demonstrations for LGBT rights and other issues as well. Katrice's struggle, which is not over perhaps, but she's here with us today. So I'm very grateful to hear all of these stories. We could have had 4 more women, or 8 or 10 or 20 more women in this congregation.
Next year.
And next year, if we do this again, maybe we'll do another panel and include other women's voices and their experiences. So thank you very much. I'm going to go back up and be the facilitator. So our closing congregational song is going to be one of my favorites, Song of the Soul by Chris Williamson. I invite you to stand and, as you're willing and able, and sing Song of the Soul in the pink book on page 106.
And this is certainly one where you need to sway with it.
Open mine eyes that I may see glimpses of truth that hangs for me. Open mine eyes to illumine me. Spirit divine, love of my life, I am dying. I am not dying, I am standing. Standing alone in the madness, there is no sadness, only a song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along, and we can sing for a long, long time, and we'll sing this song. Why don't we sing along, and we can sing for a long, long time. What do you do for your living? Are you forgiving, giving shelter? Follow your heart, love will find you, will unbind you. Sing out a song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along, and sing for a long, long time, and we'll sing this song. And we can sing for a long, long time. Come to your life like a warrior, nothing will bore you, you can be happy. Let the light in you heal you, and you can feel you. Sing out a song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Sing along, and we can sing for a long, long
So we have an announcement and final words. Reverend Martin Mitchener has the announcement that the second Sunday discussion group will meet after the service today. Our closing words are from Eleanor Roosevelt. You never know how strong a woman is, like a tea bag, until you get her in hot water.